This is using Qri for October 5th, 2020. And as we had promoted previously, I think the agenda today is going to focus mostly around previewing the coming features in the next Qri Desktop release. Is this big enough to be 050? Okay, so for anyone watching this, what we're talking about is 050. And who's going to lead? I'm going to do a little trading off.
Yeah, I think so. I can start, and then if others want to jump in or take over. I know a number of people have been working on this, but yeah, this is all based on work that Chris kicked off a while ago. When did we first show wireframes for this? It was some time ago that we first showed wireframes for this, like a number of months.
I think it was in April.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Long time coming. We've been wanting to get back to desktop for a while. For a number of reasons, we sort of like spent a long time really just hardening and fixing and improving the backend and cloud services in the interceding months. But now it's time to get back to desktop, and I think we have a much better version of desktop, and so we can show you a working app today instead of just a demo of a bunch of wireframes, which is the big shift that we've tried to facilitate over the last week. It's hard to believe that this is just a week of work. And so, yeah, with that, give me 1 second. I will share my screen, and hopefully everything will work. Share. Does everyone see a desktop with a screen recording icon and is this a gopher GIF? Get out of here. Get out of here. Okay, cool. That's more presentable. Cool. So this is the new desktop interface that we're going to be putting up very soon. And what you're looking at is the revised collection view. Actually, for point of comparison, I'll open the old Qri Desktop. We'll see how long it survives before it crashes. But because we're basically running incompatible API versions with this, but this is version 0.4.5 of the app. And so just to get a side-by-side comparison, we're going from this on the right to this on the left. And so the first big thing that, Chris, if you want to jump in at any point, this is really a very labor of love on your part. But we just wanted to see a better list here. And so in the past, I could filter by, B5, and I could just see B5 stuff. But immediately, the first thing we wanted to see was a better list view that just shows everything as the main content of the screen. We no longer have this welcome to query section. And then immediately getting into better ways to sort of slice and dice the data sets that you have. And so this My Datasets button right off the top is a much more useful thing that I used to have to just do. I gave away the click, but I used to have to do something different for that. But I can now see very clearly and easily that I have 46 data sets locally. I have 20 data sets that are mine. And we even get indicators that change this. If I want to, I can very quickly, this is the most recent thing to land. I can actually just sort stuff by size finally, which has been a long time coming. Sort stuff by when it was last updated, whatever you'd like to see. On top of that, we've added a bunch of really important indicators right in line in the list itself. So I can very quickly see that this data set has been published, that this data set is not linked to a working directory. This one has a working directory. This one is not published. I have this fast action item that allows me to delete stuff. If I click it properly, I have to click it properly. And we also support bulk actions on data sets. So I can now very quickly sort of say, well, I shouldn't do this with my own data sets. I should do this with, let's do Rem Fox's 10 movies and Paul Crickard's e-scooter data. And I can click this pull latest button, and this will go and pull 2 data sets. Don't worry, we will improve this. And you will see now that we actually have a progress indicator that shows us what's happening in the background. And happens so fast that I can't see transfers, but let's do another one, something that's larger. Hey, let's sort by size and do 79. That looks fun. Let's do Christos. Actually, let's not do Christos. It's because of a name thing that I'm afraid of. Let's do Turnstile Daily Count for 2020.
That was updated this morning.
That was?
Yeah.
Okay, so this will actually go. So if I click pull data, it'll pull this latest. And then if I keep this thing open, you can now see, hey, we're downloading this. Oh, with the clipping error, doing it live, bugs. But now, and this is actually, this survives across views. And so we can actually see, hey, it was pulled one data set, we're all done. Great, fun, nice. And we also have like a much nicer view of the actual data sets themselves. The big shout out to Ramfox, who's been doing all this work, where we actually enacted a wireframe put forth by Chris that really changes the way that we look at data sets now. And so here we have the full history of a data set on the left, and I can sort of quickly browse between versions, which is nice. But then I also can very easily get to the working data version of a data set. So because I actually own this data set, I can work on it directly. And so you'll see editable screens on the left. And the way that we used to do this inside of the old data set, or the old desktop views, we actually had things split between history and status. And now instead we've sort of found this a little bit confusing, and we think that it's a lot easier just to see, hey, this working data set right here. We should highlight this commit button in blue when you actually, oh, if I can make a change, will it do that? No. Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Moments of delight. But we've also fixed a number of bugs that are worth pointing out. Dustin recently shipped a fix that allows me to actually type in the middle, which sadly wasn't possible a little while ago. It was possible, it just was bad. It's better now. It was bad before. Also, when I navigate away from this, or if I try to edit something else, I should get a warning, correct? Somebody stop me if I'm not going to get a warning. No. There are warnings. There's more warnings. This works because I'm in an FSI link directory, but there are more warnings on how stuff works. We have a number of just like general quality of life improvements across the app itself. And so, yeah, that's kind of the high level view of what's going on. If anybody else wants to share a screen or whatnot, I will stop sharing screen, but leave this open for if you want me to sort of just buzz through something a change that you've made, or you can share yourself. But that's the 10,000 foot view of what we've been working on, and this will be released this week. And so you should see this as an automatic update to Qri Desktop sometime this week. Anybody else want to add anything?
I think it's worth noting that the original inspiration way back in October of 2019 for Qri Desktop was modeled after GitHub Desktop, which had this kind of ever persistent sidebar of repos that you can click on and read between. I think where that started to diverge was that GitHub Desktop is not really an editor; it's more for reviewing things that changed. And personally, as a developer, I still will like the GUI, so I can go in and get a nice little report of what changed after I'm done with coding. I think Qri Desktop is just kind of a little different because it becomes the editor, and right now it's the only way to get data into Qri without using command line tools and doing things in the terminal. So it really needed to become much more of a create new data sets from there, which is not something I do a whole lot of in GitHub Desktop. Like actually start filling in information from scratch via a lot of forms, which doesn't those don't exist in GitHub Desktop either. So that's where the you think they're just version control systems, but they have actual different use cases and different users and different semantics of how you make things in the either repo or data set. So anyway, I think we're on the right track, and it's much more joyful to traverse your collection of query data sets. I think plenty more awesome stuff to come as soon as this is out.
Fantastic synopsis. Anybody else want to share anything? I totally forgot to share. I forgot to show off your export modal as well, which we can do this now too. Click this button. Hey, and I can export pieces of data sets, just the data set as a CSV file. This is going to be great once we actually wire this up. I'm not going to click this button because then you'll see that we haven't finished this work. Yeah, I can say, hey, I just want to do this. I want to do that. It's very, very helpful. Very, very useful.
Is that's going to be in 0502, or is that going to be, okay, cool.
It will be. It might be a simplified version that lands in 050, and then with a more sophisticated export set of options later. But there will be options. Cool.
I can also talk quickly about the user flows that we're kind of optimizing for. And the first one is the create new and update workflow. So that's really two workflows, I guess, but one is starting from scratch with a CSV We want to get that in as quickly as possible. In fact, maybe Brendan, you can show on talking the new dataset modal, where we saw in a lot of in previous iterations, if you drag in a CSV file, we would try and name your dataset based on the file name and give you a chance to change it later. What we found was that a lot of people end up publishing that dataset without ever really touching the meta. And the meta title is extremely important because while the dataset reference is obviously very descriptive and should say a lot about the dataset, the title is meant to be a little more human readable, and is what is kind of featured front and center on Qri Cloud. So Brendan, if he starts typing in a title here, now we're kind of doing it backwards, where we ask you for a title first, and then we convert that into the dataset name as you type. And again, you can always go back and change it later, but we're kind of leading in the user interface leads with title, and make sure that that's kind of prioritized as, this is the thing most people are going to see first when they start searching for your dataset on Qri Cloud. So yeah, you type that in, we get a nice dataset name off of that, and then hit create, and it'll turn into a dataset. We're hoping to add a CSV file picker to that view, or you can still do the drag and drop where you just drag in a CSV and it'll populate the file picker for you. So that's coming along too. Yeah, so the new dataset, new dataset flow where you actually end up publishing to cloud is one flow. Then there's the update flow for that person who already created the new dataset, where they want to just make a quick change and publish, which for the most part is already there. I think the navigational refactor work now kind of optimizes that, where I can just go in, click on meta on the dataset that I own, or click on readme, start typing, commit, and hit publish. So it's still a few clicks, but I mean, you still have to write a commit message and everything like that. So conversely, on the other side, there are those who are not crafting data, but who just want to get access to data and keep it up to date. So those are the folks who are going to Qri Cloud and, find a data set that, is updated every week, like the turnstile data, for example. We want them to be able to fire up Qri Desktop, hit the sync button, which Brendan was showing earlier, pull down that latest data without having to, memorize the command for the command line, and without having to know the data set reference off the top of their head. And make sure that they have the latest, and then do a quick export. So we're going to be adding a quick export CSV button in every place where there's a data set. So if either from this view up at the top, or from the list view, you'd be able to say, just give me a CSV of the latest version of this data set right now. And it'll just, dump it out into your file system, and you can get on with your life. So that's another flow we're optimizing for.
Hopefully I did a decent job of Vanna Whiting what you're talking through. But yeah, absolutely. Import and export. I have questions about integrations. I personally would love to see a button that lets me copy paste text for adding to Jupyter notebooks, just like the query.get name of dataset reference really easily. I would think that would be also really, really fun. But future work. There's always future work. Cool. Anyone else? Anything?
We did make the integrations tab on Qri Cloud, which I don't know if we've shown in any of these calls. So if you want to show that for 30 seconds, we could quickly, there's no reason why these things can't also pop up in desktop if people think that they would be helpful. But they're just kind of like pre-rendered, or I guess templated code snippets that will help you get query data into various other environments. So Jupyter, Panda, RStudio, Postgres, using PG Flutter, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is great. These are very straightforward. Let's try it. Oh no, hold on. I need to make a new terminal. Go over here. Ugh. Did it work?
A big one?
Oh yeah. How big is this? LS grep body. Yeah, it's there. Cat body.csv. No. Head. Body.csv. There we go. Recovered active. There it is. Yeah. That works. Yay, integrations. Cool. Good fun. Things working is great. Yeah, so we're really excited to get this out. This has been a bit of a PSA meeting, but the next stuff I think we do have to talk about as a group is this is an active thing, and we have a punch list of stuff to accomplish before this is actually landed and finished. Before we move on to that, Daniel, welcome, and love to leave any room open for questions or anybody else on the team or otherwise may have any sort of unsorted business. But if not, we can move on to the punch list to get desktop out the door so that we can move on to other wonderful things. Somebody have any outstanding business? Stuff they need, pull requests that need comments, changes, fixes, things they're blocked on? Awesome. Okay, let's move on to this punch list. Chris, are you cool to lead that?
Yeah, sure. Give me just a moment here. Let me clean up my tab situation. Okay, let's share screen. Let's go to, no, not desktop, to Google Chrome. Okay, so let's make this a little bigger. Okay, so yeah, this is just everything that needs to be done after kind of scrubbing and trying to click every little thing and go through every single little workflow this morning. Some stuff carried over from last week, but a big chunk we knocked out last week. So I've got this broken down into sections, but top level, we've got some tooltips that just need some rewording, so that's pretty easy. Prevent selecting text almost everywhere. I noticed that with a lot of Electron apps that if you don't disable this with CSS, it becomes very clumsy to accidentally select stuff and then it stays selected, and that's not something you want in the desktop experience. And then there's a couple of warnings in console that we should just make sure aren't yelling at us anymore. They probably don't affect the app, but they're just kind of good, good housekeeping. Then at the collection view level, so we've got action buttons. So this is the create versus new language.
Yeah, can I just interject there? I actually added that back in as a mental note for us that the create dataset modal, the old one, is still there because it's the only way right now that we can fully create a data set. So once we get the new data set modal flow right, then we could flip that back. But I thought that was a good mental thing of hey, until this is changed, we need to make sure that just wanted to point that out.
Sure.
That's really good to know, because I was going to work on that PR, and knowing that the import flow is connected to that is really useful.
Awesome. So on the data table, there's just a little CSS bug with when you click the little ... menu on the right. So other than that, the data table is looking pretty tight. That PR is actually not in yet, but I think it will be today. So bulk actions. So pull latest, quick export CSV, and remove. I guess quick export CSV / export, which we think would be a combined button with drop down type of thing. It doesn't really matter, but these are the bulk actions that need to exist, and they need to all work as expected. Yeah, so those are the same as the dataset actions, but these are just need to make sure that it can handle doing multiples. The import flow, so we kind of already talked about what we want to do there. So the file picker, drag and drop opens modal with file picker populated, and clicking create dataset and modal makes a new dataset. So basically it just means that whole thing works and we end up on the dataset workbench with our new dataset. Pull dataset, so this is add versus pull, which I think really this implies we need to make sure everywhere it used to say add should say pull probably in the new version. This one I noticed today is that when you pull a data set that you didn't have before, you end up in a weird state where you're. I think it's what happens when you try to go to edit a data set, but you don't have the permissions to do it. So I think the fix for that is just making sure that we land on viewing head on that other user's data set.
Yeah, so this is actually a problem in the data set or the workbench router in the collections whatchamacallit, component. So we have a function in there that if you're not specifically at a specific path, it reroutes you to be at the workbench, because that's what we used to do in the previous iteration. So it'll just be whatever's in that, I think it's called like reroute to edit path or something in the collections.tsx file. So
awesome.
For whoever works on that.
Awesome. And then the row actions menu. So this is not the bulk actions, but this is the row level actions. So we have a little dot menu. Remove, right now the only thing in there is remove, but we would expect for any data set in the collection view, I want to be able to pull the latest. I want to be able to export and open up that export modal, and then I want to open the export, do a quick export to CSV. This little bug with the status icons, if you click on a cloud, basically if you click on the unpublished, status icon, it still takes you to Query Cloud looking for a data set that doesn't exist. So we just need to make sure that that is not clickable. In the workbench or in the dataset view, what do we call it? Sorry, is workbench just the editor, or is workbench the entire dataset view now, or do we call that something else?
I've been saying workbench is just the editor recently. I think we should just come up with a thing and stick to it, and then change it if we see it wrong in the code base.
I think dataset view is probably good enough, and then the editor, you know what editor is, and then everything else is a viewer.
Sure.
That sound right? Okay. So we need to get data name editing back because we moved the name up into the header, and we had that feature before. We just need to make sure that that gets reinstated. These are the dataset action buttons, which are identical to the row action buttons. So we need to make sure that all these exist, and should be, basically the same stuff I can do in collection view on a data set, I should be able to do when I'm looking at that data set. Pagination, not quite working right now in both the viewer and the editor in the body. In editor, I noticed that editing a checked out file didn't immediately show up a change. I had to like reload or navigate away and come back for the change to show up. So that's something I just spotted today, but I didn't spend too much time seeing if it's isolated for any particular reason, but it's something to look into.
Real quick, what was the file you were editing? Was it the meta?
I did both meta and readme on a data set that I had just created.
Okay.
Yeah. Pagination broken on the body editor. Body update flow. Actually, I think that was working, actually. It was where I was dragging in drag and drop a CSV updates the body. But it still, I think this is an old thing, but it doesn't actually update in the view until you reload. I assume that's kind of status quo, but still something to look at later.
That's a technical challenge right now that we'd have to work our way around.
So I'll clarify these two later. And then in the commit editor, there's just some CSS cleanup, and then a placeholder that's out of whack. So this is pretty simple. And then the network view, it more or less works. You can click on a data set and explore it a little bit, and then hit the pull button. Actually, I think it says clone. Yeah, it says clone. So we just need some cleanup in this because there's some things that aren't positioned properly, and we have some really good components that exist in cloud for presenting little cards for data sets, and we should maybe try and repurpose those. So that's our punch list for this current iteration.
Feels doable.
I think so. Most of it's little.
This is a great list.
It's a very good list. I think if we get this and then we get the end-to-end tests to check these things. I mean, obviously not stuff like it should be named add or pull, but everything else. I think this is a good list. Cool. Wow. I think that can go. That covers, we just got to burn that down as fast as humanly possible and then cut a release. The other thing we'll need to do is cut, shifting gears for a quick second. We'll need to cut a backend release for this because there are some very minute but very important breaking changes to the WebSockets API. And so this may be a chance. The things that will clear with the backend release include some of the inference stuff, or not the validation stuff that not inference stuff, but the validation stuff that a number of users had been suggesting and asking for. And so I don't think we've actually gotten those into a release yet. So we should aim to cut a backend release sooner rather than later, which means that if anybody has any last wishes for stuff before backend goes out the door, now's the time to take a look at those. Holger did find an interesting, I think very small bug with validate that I filed recently. It would be awesome to get that cleaned up before we ship it out the door. If not, we'll have to get it next release. And then the other thing is,
I think that's an easy fix.
it'd be great. I think it'd be worth just taking a look sooner.
My first instinct is that it's just a flag being not handled in some if somewhere. I think that's easy.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think it'd be awesome if we could, Dustin, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that in the next day or two, that would be great.
Yeah, I can do it.
And then I think we should aim to cut a backend release, patch release, end of day tomorrow, just to get that up and out of the way. Asmir, the OAuth stuff, where are we at on that? And should we get that merged? Is that not merged into core? Yeah.
Partially. That's the correct
That's
answer.
an interesting answer.
Yeah. So Query Core currently has some basic support to just shuffle around tokens, but it's not really used extensively. Cloud has all the infra implemented and all the flows implemented, and front end on Cloud is slated to get auth next, and that's where we're currently at. Moving forward, we would probably do the CLI and move that to auth as well. Introduce it on the API side as well, and then slowly move towards like node to node or like user hosted remotes. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, for those playing along at home, Query is adding an authentication layer. The first bits of this are landing the capacity for OAuth in core. Our authorization story is very funky considering we're a federated app, which means that we actually have to be able to do node to node authorization and cloud to node authorization, which is funky and weird. And so Asmir has been spearheading a bunch of work on that. We're going to try and keep that as vanilla OAuth seeming as possible. There will obviously be places where we'll need to depart, but we think we found some ways to do that that is generally compliant with the OAuth specification. If you can call OAuth a specification. It's more of like a set of ideas, but like, yeah, whatever. Cool. I think that covers everything we wanted to cover. Let's go get some work done. Does anybody have any questions, closing thoughts?
I just had a question. Sorry, Asmir, could you clarify just for my brain? So we, and I know I'm obviously reviewing the OAuth front end PR right now, but the idea is that is just OAuth for front end to the query to the cloud backend, and that's the scope of that.
Yeah,
and then
pretty much.
later refactors will be query backend to like API requests and stuff like that, or like cloud API requests.
Yeah. So the main reason for the core integration with auth is that later on we can actually delegate like the usage of your own private key to some other node. So you'll give it some credentials and then it will run on your behalf, which is currently not possible. So that's kind of like just the plumbing and infra to set it all up. So you don't share your private key, but you do share some credentials with that node, and that node can then act on your behalf. So that's pretty much part of the automation story. And hopefully we'll land parts of that soon and be able to run Dockerized without like moving private keys around and stuff like that.
Cool.
Phenomenal synopsis. OAuth leads to automation. Cool. Anything else? Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Productive call. Really excited to get this stuff out the door, and hopefully we can just all be looking at actual downloaded releases on Friday. In the meantime, thank you so much. Have a lovely week, and we'll talk to you soon.
See y'all.